looking at me like, that's not James Bond. It's James Bond. Yeah, he was James Bond. And I was talking to Roger, and then he was married to a Danish lady. And he was like, surrounded by Scandinavians. And I was about to leave. He'd had a few glasses of champagne, I think. And it was a big restaurant packed, during the festival, the Cannes Festival. So I'm walking away, and Dolph, he says, across the whole restaurant, everybody's like, holy shit. They realized it was him, and he says, Dolph, we have another thing in common. I also hate Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'm like, I don't hate him, but, interesting comment. I guess he played a bad guy in a Van Damme movie or something, and it didn't turn out too well. And I think he fired his agent because of that. Anyway, there you go.
Question about that era. You mentioned Andy Warhol being in Interview magazine.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about what it was like, the factory and all this stuff, and the late '70s, early '80s by then. What was your impression? Because here you were, you've been in school, you've been doing a lot of traveling, to suddenly be in the thick of like this legendary, iconic figure, and all these people that were coming in and out of Warhol's orbit.
Well, it was very interesting. He was very, very nice. He was very nice to me. Very smart guy. I realized that he had a lot of people around the factory all the time, and I think I was there a few times when he was taking Polaroids of Grace, and I was going in the back looking at all his. He had like a bit of a storage area with all his artwork, and I always remember seeing one thing. He had a dinner in Munich, like in the '60s sometime, and he bought the whole table. And when the dinner was over, he bought the whole table, and he somehow it was packed in plexiglass, and he cut it up into little pieces, and then sucked the air out. I think so. All the food, everything was still there, with a bill, and I never saw that anywhere else. But I guess it must have been one of his art pieces. But I remember basically, this is like they say, the time. It was New York City, and this is before he got corporate, so it was very kind of loosey-goosey, and it was dangerous. Grace, I remember, went into her bag. She said, "Give me my cigarettes." In some club, I come up with this little toy gun, and I look at it, and it's a real gun. It's like a little Derringer like a 32 caliber, and I'm like, "Why you got a gun?" Well, we got tied up. Guy came into our apartment, tied me and my boyfriend up, and robbed us, and I was like, shit, So I remember carrying a gun most of the time. I went to Colorado, bought some guns. There were no metal detectors. It was a different time, And 54, basically, I think most things you hear about is true. It was, if you paid your if you got in, if they picked you out and you paid $20, you could pretty much do anything you wanted in there. It was kind of a bit of a crazy place, It's like they say, it's the time between the pill and age. So people were a little more freewheeling in their social activities. It's interesting to have seen it. I survived.
So that's one of your lives, right? The actor life, and I believe you said that you've lived 5 lives. I want to talk about the 2 lives that came before the actor life. The life of the engineer, the scientist, the life of the martial artist. And what I find most interesting about that is that you were clearly somebody who was developing your mind with the same intensity that you were developing your body and what your body could do. And how did you find the time, to put the kind of intense training that you would need to put in to be, a karate champion and actually fighting, not just point sparring, Olympic style, but actually fighting, and at the same time pursue all of those degrees?
Well, yeah, good question. First of all, I didn't have a girlfriend, so that didn't distract me. But basically, I think what happened was my dad and my older brother were engineers. My other brother's an engineer, and I guess I wanted to impress my dad. I think my dad was kind of very smart guy, but he has his issues. He was kind of violent towards me and my mom, so I had this kind of a bit of a trauma from my childhood. That I think that's the reason I became a fighter, because a lot of, if you speak to men who are in contact sports or in the military or in the police force, a lot of them may have some experience like that, because I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, it kind of motivates you to try to want to be strong and stand up for yourself, which I did.
Both of these were to protect yourself from your dad, mentally and physically.
That's correct. Yeah, you're right. I haven't thought of it that way. Yeah, mentally because I wanted to impress him, and then physically because just in case, and also I think it was because I couldn't protect my mom, so I was kind of trying to kind of overcompensate, and I would say that. Once I started pursuing, I was also sick as a kid. I had a lot of allergies, so I wasn't really athletic till I was in my teens. So my first sort of way of feeling special was that I was, I got good grades and I was smart, So then I kind of shifted over slowly towards more physical life. So then I ended up doing both because I wanted to go to America because I was there on a scholarship. My dad actually, he was a smart guy. I mean, he had issues, but he always said, he didn't like Sweden. It's a socialistic country, you can never do anything here. They take all your money, and there are too many taxes. If you want to be somebody, you got to go to America. He told me that like when I was a kid. I was like, okay. And then I guess I did, I heard, he was right, so I did that.
So you're fighting, and you're fighting in Japan, as I understand, right?
Yeah, I fought in Sweden first, then I fought in Japan, I fought in Australia when I was there. I won the European Championships, won the Australian Open when I was studying, and I was in Japan training as well. By the time I was about to fight in the World Tournament, when I was one of the favorites, I would say, I'd already moved to New York and I was about to get into acting, so I didn't follow through there.
But you were doing this, and at the same time you were pursuing this whole other life. And here's what I find I don't want to say that it's crazy, but it's kind of crazy. So, you're a scientist by training. You're an engineer. Certainly there must be some aspiration in that direction, but you're in this full contact, no kidding sport, and you are risking your instrument, your brain, right? I mean, you're probably like absolutely the smartest person that's conventional, right? And you are risking your brain by having some wacko kick you in the side of the head.
No, you're right. My dad didn't, it was complicated. You're right, very complex. I got into the fighting because I had something to express. I had some built up trauma, physical trauma, because of the beatings I would get when I was a kid. And I think the only way to express that is, it's called, I've learned later, escape behavior. You're trying to escape something like PTSD. A soldier, you're living under life-threatening conditions, say in Afghanistan, and you're there for a year. And while you're fighting, it's okay. Your body is in survival mode. You don't really suffer too much from it. But when you get back, when it's over, your body has like another reaction. Your body has to compensate somehow. You have to, what comes in through the body has to go out through the body. And the escape behavior could be drugs, alcohol, affairs, violence, things like that. And I think that I had that. It was in me already. And if I hadn't become a fighter, I would have maybe self-destructed in some other way if I hadn't become an actor, because that was more of an emotional expression. So that would, I think without that I wouldn't have survived probably. I would have been very unhappy as an engineer, I would say, because I had something else that I had to deal with. And acting and fighting was a way for me to deal with that. I didn't know it at the time, but that's how I dealt with it, And that's why I would go out there and, get my nose broken or something, and then I have to go and do a thermonuclear whatever exam 2 days later or something.
As you do.
It's like, who is this guy? What's his problem?
Michael Jai White says that there are martial artists and there are fighters. Clearly, at least from the way you talk about it, I believe you see yourself as a fighter first, martial artist second. And I could be wrong and correct me, but the second part of that is he brings up Bruce Lee as the example of he's the greatest martial artist who ever lived, not a fighter. You got to work with Brandon, who is also a terrific martial artist. Can you talk a little bit first about what Michael said about the difference, and then about working with Brandon and the kind of martial artist that he was?
Well, there's a good, I like Michael J. He's a smart guy. He's right, I do think that you can be a martial artist and a fighter. You can be both. Like my instructor was a world champion, British karate fighter, but he was a martial artist. And martial artist means you've adopted a certain attitude of discipline and self-control, and there's a certain spiritual aspect to it. And I think not all fighters have it, but a lot of fighters have that. But what Michael means that you can be very good at performing martial arts, but not a great fighter, because you need the killer instinct to be a fighter. It's fight or flight, and it's in your body, and it's hard to know how you're going to react under pressure. Like they say in combat, it's hard to know. Maybe the biggest guy in the platoon, who's the guy who everybody looks up to, could turn and run. Whereas the guy who you think looks like a coward could be the ass kicker who goes out and kicks ass and kills everything. Yeah, it's an instinct. It's hard to judge, and the same with fighting. So I think I realized I had an aptitude for fighting because I'd already been sort of in a near-death experience as a kid, so I didn't really mind it too much. It didn't really scare me a little bit. It scared me a little bit, but not enough to back up. So that's true, and I like Brandon very much. He was a very good martial artist, you're right. And I think he was also, it's not easy to be Bruce Lee's son. Where are you going to, is that being Clint Eastwood? Do Westerns, trying to beat him, it's hard. So I like Brandon very much. I thought he would have been a huge movie star. I thought he was a very good actor. As good as Bruce Lee had a lot of charisma, but I think Brandon was a very good actor. I remember that. He was very talented. So, Bruce, I don't know if Bruce Lee ever fought in a real tournament. I don't think he did. Maybe that's what Michael Jai White's talking about. And I know Michael is a fighter. Yeah, he's a fighter, but he's also a martial artist. So, one doesn't preclude the other.
Could you take Michael in a fight?
I don't know. Maybe in the old days, he's a bit younger than me, I think. Was about 15 years younger. But I'll wait 15 years and I'll take him.
That's my plan too, honestly.
I want to ask you about Drago. The Rocky franchise is so fascinating. 1976, it wins Best Picture. It's super grounded. It's super 70s. It's real straight. By the time we get to Rocky IV, it's after Rocky III, which is like a comic book movie. There's a superhero and a supervillain. Rocky superhero, Clubber Lang supervillain. Now, Rocky IV is that too, and it's just as wonderful as the original Rocky for a whole different set of reasons. But how do you approach a character like that? Because I would think you still want it to be grounded, you want him to feel real, but he's larger than life.
Yeah, well, good question. Like as Rocky, he's the only boxer. The more he gets hit, the better, the better he looks. Because he had facial surgery. His jawline, his suits get better. And anyway, but I agree with you that I obviously for me was a big break. I realized it was a great opportunity, and I was studying with this guy Warren Robertson, who was an acting coach in New York, who worked with Jessica Lange and. A lot of big actors.
No relation to Clubber Lang.
No, Clubber Lang. Yeah, you're right. His cousin. No, but the guy who did Tom Hulse, who played in Mozart and Amadeus, he was nominated. He was a young actor. He was in class with me actually, Tom Hulse, and he got that part in 1984, I think, and I got the Rocky part same year. But anyway, I was working with Warren, and you know, he's a method actor, so it was like, you know, even though I didn't really know that much about acting, you know, it suited me. Obviously, the guy's a Soviet fighter, he's a champion. I had all that already. I had the attitude. I understood that, and then I had to work on the Soviet part of it. But I was lucky because Warren had some good ideas of being minimalistic, not to move too much, just to move the eyes, you know, like stay very, and that's very difficult. Efficiency, like subtlety. And then when I got the part, they gave me this Russian language coach, but he was a stage director from Leningrad, and he was very clever. And he had escaped Soviet Union. He defected, right? So he knew how they treat young boys that have athletic talent. They're taken from their parents, they're put in a school, they're trained, you know, they have to train 6 hours a day, and if they fail, they're kicked back into some shitty job in the factory. So there's a lot of pressure. And he told me that, you know, this character, he saw Drago as somebody who's got this, he wants revenge. He wants revenge, not on the Americans as much as on his own people. Like he's been, prove yourself and to prove them wrong. You know? So that's kind of where his kind of attitude comes from. And the fact that he ends up killing Apollo Creed wasn't really his doing. It just happened, and you know, he just doesn't feel good about that. So there's all these levels to the character that, you know, that you kind of feel it a little bit when you watch the movie. You're still, you know, scared of Drago and the kids. Shit scared of this big Soviet guy, you know, American kids, he's the supervillain. But there was something in the character that was human, that was relatable, and I think that's why I ended up playing, you know, my next picture was, you know, American hero, you could say, He-Man, right? So, yeah, so I approached it that way, and I think, you know, between Warren and I had 6 months with Warren, and I had 6 months with this other guy, David Gamberg, the director. So, you know, Stanislavski said it takes 9 months for a baby to develop. It takes 9 months to develop a real dramatic character, at least. And I had about a year. So, you know, so it came from a very deep level, a lot of that stuff. And I think that's why the character, I mean, the movie was great, and Sly did a great job, but I think there is something in that character that, you know, I haven't worked that much on as many characters in my career, maybe a few, but, you know, it's that work that shines through.
Well, if there's any connection to chemical engineering, it's the chemistry that you have in that movie against Slav. It's an amazing amalgam of, you know, good versus evil.
Yeah, good versus evil.
So it comes across so real.
I wouldn't call Sly evil in that movie, but
yeah, he wasn't that evil, but he, you know, as a director, he was a bit evil, you know. What the fuck you doing? Grandmother can do better than that. I think no, you're right. I think there's good versus evil, and then there's a sort of on a deeper level, like a sort of a brotherhood of these two guys.
Right.
Like the end, there's some kind of feeling of like you kind of don't hate Drago anymore. You realize he was just,
you understand.
yeah, he was just trying to, like, you know,
a poor boy trying to make it in the world.
Yeah, trying to make it in the Soviet Union. And yeah, so I think that you're right. There was a lot of there's some interesting stuff in the picture, and I don't know. You know, I think about it sometimes that I wasn't aware of the fact that, you know, when I spoke some of those lines 40 years ago, that I'm going to be saying that shit for like 40 years. But, you know, then I saw Coppola, you know, I saw in a retrospective of his pictures, he was talking about, you know, his movies, right? And he said, you know, all his movies are very different, right? Like, he really tries to go, you know, from The Godfather to like Apocalypse Now, and then he has, you know, other, you know, about, you know, somebody starting a car in a factory, a car brand. Yeah, what's that one called? Turner? Tucker, yeah. Anyway, he was saying how some movies, he said all his movies were not received very well when they first opened, you know. And he said like some movies have a lot, they live on. They live on, and that means it takes about 20 years to know which film's going to live on and which won't. And just because it makes a lot of money doesn't mean it will live on. It just means it made a lot of money. It's because some movies that don't make a lot of money live on for like 100 years.
Well,
so, you know.
Speaking of that, I mean, 40 years later, you get a call from your agent saying, they want you to play Drago again. What was that? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not even Star Wars. I mean, suddenly you hear you're getting a call to reprise this character after literally decades. What was your feeling about that?
Yeah, I didn't feel like I wanted to do it. I thought they were going to exploit the character and make him like a silly bad guy, you know, like a cardboard cutout. And there was a script. I started reading it, and I stopped after about 20 pages. Like, this is shit. I don't want to do this. You know, it was like racial. You know, he was a racist. And my son in the movie was like, you know, with Michael B. You know, it's like, nah, this is bad. But then they brought in this new director, Stephen Capel, and he rewrote it. And you know, he comes from the projects, this guy, and he understood. Okay, Drago and his son, they're like living the projects in Ukraine, you know, so he kind of rewrote the characters, and I read that script, and it was very good, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool, because basically the whole premise for my guy was, if there's one guy in the whole wild world who will never throw in the towel, it's Ivan Drago. And of course, at the end of the movie, when he throws it in to save his son, it's like, well, shit, you know, who thought of that? I mean, because you don't even remember that there is the opportunity to throw in the towel. I couldn't even, you know, it's an expression that you can actually do it, you know? And so I thought, wow, this is a great arc. If I ever saw a good arc, this is it. So I love that one, yeah, it was good.
So another character who never throws in the towel is one that, yeah, there's one you played that people don't really think about, but honestly, it might be maybe my favorite version of it because it was just so insane. You were the first actor who ever played the Punisher.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it was the best delivery of the line, "I'm Batman," that anybody has ever delivered on screen. When the lady,
I can't remember that. But
yeah,
I guess I said it.
the crazy Yakuza lady was like torturing you, and she asked you who you were, and you said, "I'm Batman." It was awesome. Come on, people. But I mean, that's New World Pictures. That's Roger Corman. That's like a world removed from working on something like He-Man or working on something like Rocky IV.
Well,
yeah.
Rocky.
Yeah. Well, the first
Rocky.
20 minutes of He-Man are pretty crazy, but yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I didn't know who the Punisher was. I got some comic books and checked them out. But it was also rewritten. The script was written by Robert Kamen, who did, you know, Karate Kid. He wrote, you know, Taken, I think, and ended up doing all of those later. A very good writer, and he's a martial artist too. He's a Goju guy. So that was fun. That's kind of when I brought martial arts back, because I hadn't done any martial arts in my other films, and that was the first time they brought some fighters in from Tokyo, and these two guys from Tokyo, and they showed up in Sydney, Australia, and they were thinking they're here to fight me, you know, fight Dolph Lundgren. But no, they're here for a movie. They didn't understand it. You know, so they were both. When they both got killed in a picture, they were both in tears. They were crushed. They can't go back to Japan now. You know, they've lost face. One was actually in tears on the set. Yeah, it was funny. But
Did you kill him and put him out of his misery?
Yeah, with the spear.
Sorry, man.
Sorry, buddy.
So let's talk a little bit about He-Man, because it is a divisive movie. Some people, you know, think it's fine, it's a cartoon thing. Other people love it. I'm in that second group. I love He-Man. I think you are so iconic and chiseled and surreal in it that it's so much fun to watch. And I actually went and I saw it at the Universal City Cinemas with James Cameron. And we watched that, and afterwards we said, well, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? I'd say, yeah. But I so enjoy that movie, and I'm friends with Bill Malone, who was the main designer on it. And it's such a surprise to see this, little cartoon made so beautifully real, and you fit so well in it.
I mean, I do think the character, I saw the movie. It was the 40th anniversary of the birth of He-Man. I think he came out in 1983 or something. So 2023. I went to a Marvel screening of that picture, and it was cool. I mean, it kind of holds up. I saw a 35 millimeter print, which is kind of cool.
It totally does.
Yeah, it holds up. I mean, it's very kind of childlike, but I like it. It holds up, and I do look pretty buffed. Like, how do you end up looking like that? I don't know. I mean, it's like watching Arnold in Conan.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going to pull that off today. I mean, there are enough steroids in the world to look like that because people don't want to train 8 hours a day like Arnold did, Yeah, I like Masters, and I think there's a certain resurgence because there's a new picture coming out next year. I noticed now the signing at the table signings, there's Masters and Rocky are kind of like dead heat now. It's sort of it's almost. I think Rocky still has a little edge, but say 20 years ago, there was very little Masters.
Right.
That's coming back. There's something kind of interesting about that story, I think.
I think so.
Well, who would win in a fight, He-Man or Ivan Drago?
Well, I think He-Man's got the sword, I mean. And I was bigger as He-Man. I weighed about 250, and then Rocky was about 225.
Wow, you're just a little guy.
Yeah, just a tiny little runt.
And I think, it's wonderful how candid and funny you are talking about that movie, Electric Boogaloo, the great documentary about Canon Films and the infamous Go-Go Boys. What else, you all were rowing in one direction, trying to make your own version of Star Wars, adapt this animated series into this great movie, and then you have Golan and Globus, who are just sort of tripping you guys up at every turn to accomplish what you set out to do, whether it's Gary directing and you guys, and you still managed to pull it off despite having all of these impediments, which the producer should be working with you, not against you.
Well, you're right. I mean, but I think it's part of my path on this earth is to be up against, tough odds all the time. I mean, I have been from the beginning since I was a kid, and you're right. Yeah, that movie could have been, much better, and could have been better producers, more money, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you look at my buddy Stallone. He was obviously, he wanted to be an actor since he was very young. He was, he's a terrific writer. I mean, his first picture, he won the Academy Award he was nominated as an actor, won for Best Screenplay, and and I started out in totally different side. Came in as a kind of a fighter, as I don't know what, chemical engineer / karate champion / actor. And then I got famous overnight. Overnight, basically in 90 minutes, I went from nobody really knew who I was to, everybody wanted to take pictures of me, and I kind of, my head was spinning for 4 or 5 years after, and so Masters is just part of that kind of maelstrom of like, the hell happened, and so I think I wasn't really focused on how do I make
The difficult childhood that you had to figure out how to survive martial arts was obviously a part of that. Like your academic pursuits were a part of that, but you had a terrible health scare.
Yeah, I did actually. I thought I had some bad battles, in the past, but then of course I didn't know the big one was about to come up about 5 years ago, and I went through cancer. Situation good. I was being treated by a very good doctor in Los Angeles, but it turned out they hadn't really done their homework, and I sent some biopsies and things off to another doctor at UCLA because of a friend of mine, and she said, that's the wrong treatment. You've been on the wrong treatment for a couple of years. So when I changed, I was losing weight, and everything kind of changed. I'm helping some other folks. People come to me and ask for advice. Sometimes I try to point them in the right direction, because if I hadn't done what I did, I would have been dead. Like if I hadn't, like I usually do, like you're in a fight and you're so, in karate, you'd have to pick you up off the mat and tie your belt and throw you back out there, and then suddenly, you realize the other guy he never got back up, and you won, and you're like, oh shit, I won this fight. But that's how much hard it is sometimes, and it was the same with this cancer battle. But finally, I kind of pulled out of it, and I must say that it was kind of one of the best things that ever happened to me was to go through that, because I kind of look at life differently now. It doesn't really bother me. Little things don't bother me much. I'm very happy, grateful for everything I've gotten so far in this life, and I think if the cancer hadn't come, I probably would have. I was burning the candle at both ends, too much travel, too much training, too much of this, too much of that. Being a dad, is that what you said? Yeah. I wouldn't say it is one of the most difficult, but also one of the most rewarding things, because, once you have somebody who means more to you than yourself, like if you have to give up your life for somebody, you can do it without hesitation for your kid, then I think it's a very sobering experience, and it's a great experience to have that. Otherwise, you can become too egocentric, especially in our business. I love that. No, it's been good, and it's difficult when you're in the show business to make sure you're with your kids enough. And I've been, in some ways not a good dad, and I respect.
What was the impetus for that, and what were some of the lessons you took from directors you work with that you applied to your own directing career?
Yeah, thanks. I've directed a couple of movies because I wanted to see what it was like. One, that was part of it, and the other part was this is about 5 years before Expendables, the first Expendables. Provided than most of the other directors they could hire, that they could afford. So I drew on my own creativity, my own experience from all those directors I worked with, especially good guys like Stallone, for instance, John Woo. I worked with him. There were many other directors I've worked with that I kind of just picked up things from. How they make the actors feel comfortable, how like Stallone, they prepare a lot beforehand. Other directors who are very much into being, spontaneous on set. Editing, I've been part of editing pictures before, and also writing is important. So, I don't write from scratch, but I rewrite stuff. So I think all of that was just something I wanted to try and see if I can do it,
Well, at the beginning of the panel, you mentioned Jean-Claude, but I'd love to talk just briefly about Universal Soldier and working with Roland Emmerich. And obviously that's another film that's really beloved in your oeuvre. Are you surprised when you did that movie has stood the test of time?
Yes and no. I mean, that was another picture that maybe didn't do as well as they had hoped for at the time. Because it was the first time I co-starred with somebody, same bill. I was billed equal billing with another actor. Before, with Stallone, of course, I was way down, and Masters, I was, about the title, and then it was me and Jean-Claude. And I learned a lot from him. He was smarter than me in many ways about his career, about, designing his fight scenes, and, so it was a good experience. Roland, of course, was very clever, and I think he did a good job. They had to reshoot the ending. There was a slight story problem in that picture. So they did a test, it didn't work out well, they had to reshoot the ending, add more fighting between us. But I think that the picture is kind of still very 90s, and people seem to like it, because it's me and Jean-Claude as young men, we're just fresh in the business and squaring off. I think, I like that picture too. I think it's a cool picture.
This has been so much fun. I don't have any more questions because I think you've answered everything.
I think there's probably a lot more to talk about, but we can't because we're at the end of the panel. We want to thank you, Dolph. This is terrific. terrific. Having you here was wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And, Dolph will be at his table with Greta signing for the rest of the convention. So if there are questions you didn't get to ask or you want to get his autograph, please visit him at their table.
And help us decide, what is bigger, Rocky or Masters of the Universe, right? This is really
It's up to you.
poll that we're
Yeah,
conducting.
and I wanted to thank you guys. It was a pleasure to have a panel like this. They usually have just one person, but you guys are very knowledgeable, and it was really nice to get those
Well, we
questions.
figured it had to be 3 against 1.
At least.
Yeah, oh, by the way, please don't leave. Mainly because we'd be fired if we didn't tell you that. Also, there's a GalaxyCon tradition. Some of you may be aware of it. You've experienced it. We do the stage selfie. We bring the group up. You guys stand behind the stage. You don't jump on it. And they bring a photographer out who's going to take a picture of all of you with Dolph. So please come on up. And there's no exiting. There's no exiting. The fire marshal will appear and demand that you pack together.
Magnifying glass. Microscope. Everybody's ready. Are we ready? Yep. Ready. Yeah. You guys ready? Yeah.
This is what you call being close. We're all close.
All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. We're gonna do one more. Great job, everyone. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Great job, everyone.